welcome. We're at the New York Summit, NY. And I have with me, wait, I'm not going to introduce you. You introduce yourself.
Thanks, Tara. My name's Richard. I'm from the AWS mobile team, and I work on a couple of different teams. One is a team called AWS AppSync, and this is a managed GraphQL service for application data, both real-time and offline, as well as on some of the client teams, including AWS Amplify, which is a declarative JavaScript library that's open source, fully under Apache 2.0, and we're going to talk about some of both of these things today.
Exactly. For those of you guys who don't know me, I'm Tara Walker. I am a technical evangelist, and we are going to talk about some of the cool new things with mobile. If you're into mobile, this is going to be right up your alley. So before we start with this, let's just kind of level set with everyone. What is AppSync? What is Amplify? Because I think we know, and it's a really cool service, but you guys out there might not know. So kind of tell us, what is AppSync? What is Amplify?
Okay, cool. Let me start a little bit with Amplify for everyone.
Okay.
So obviously JavaScript, big language, the web's built on top of it, and
yep.
Not just mobile web, but also hybrid apps from React Native to Ionic and other languages as well, native script. And a lot of the developers in the JavaScript space have a hard time building cloud-enabled apps. Mm-hmm. There's all this complexity, right? There's all these concepts around authentication and federation, uploading data, streaming data, things like dealing with REST and GraphQL APIs and stuff like that.
Yep.
So what we did is we built this library that's category-based. And by category-based, what I mean are these declarative interfaces that allow you to just interact with auth. And then you can do simple actions like register user or sign in.
Nice.
And then we thread all of this stuff through the application context so that it's easy to just store data or get data or send information to an API behind the scenes. On the flip side, AppSync is a managed GraphQL service for application data.
Yay, GraphQL.
Yes, yay, GraphQL. And it's really, really targeted and tuned to front-end and mobile engineers who are building these real-time apps, data-driven apps. And what you can do with it is essentially, instead of doing all of these multiple REST calls and walking microservices in your application on the back end and using extra network bandwidth, extra CPU on the device and so forth, you can easily just connect this single back end to DynamoDB tables, to Elasticsearch, to Lambda, to some other stuff that we're going to talk about today.
Yep.
And you can build these real-time collaborative apps. You can do conflict resolution across shared data on devices, automatic synchronization, and it's got an offline programming interface, which is pretty cool as well. And we're going to talk about some new stuff there as well today.
Why wait? So you guys are ready, I'm ready, right? So tell us about what is the new cool hotness about these two new services. For those of you guys who haven't played around with yet, now's the time. Tell us what's new about these new services that you're telling us about today. Like, what's the new cool things?
Okay, great. So the first thing I'm going to talk about for a few minutes is some of the new things that we've added to Amplify.
Okay, so you're going to show us, okay, let's switch to your screen. Let's check out, okay, what are those new services?
Well, we're actually like 1.0ing basically the Amplify library. So it's been out, it's been being used by thousands of developers over the past 6 months or so, since a couple weeks before reInvent is when we launched this. And all sorts of great feedback and everything, but we really wanted to harden this to make it something for production use in enterprise space, especially when you look at progressive web apps, you look at bundling, trying to minimize download sizes of applications and so forth. So we've modularized the entire package, and you can use NPM scope packages now to download some of these categories to program against.
Very nice.
For instance, you can see on the screen, right, I can just NPM install at Amplify core, I can just pull in auth, I can just pull in storage, and then I can just import just that one module into my app.
Give me a good example of how that minimizes the footprint. So just what was it before, what can I expect now? Let's say I just want to do one of these packages. How much does that minimize that footprint?
So we've run some performance metrics on some of these, and before, like maybe you would be around a meg or plus or minus depending on what framework are you using. But like I've actually got a React app that I've run on my system now with just the auth module, and it's down to around 300K.
Oh, wow.
And we've run Google Lighthouse scores on this, and we've seen improvements of like 30 to 40% on some of your apps that you're creating.
Very nice, very nice.
And now, I'm talking about React, for example, but this isn't just for React. Amplify supports Angular, it supports Vue, even supports frameworks like Ionic. And in fact, just to show you a little bit of code here, this is an example Ionic app that I've actually pulled in Amplify Angular. Let me make the code a little bit bigger. And so this is using the Ionic CLI, the new version for an Ionic Tabs application. And you can see we've actually got Amplify service modules that you can pull in, AWS Amplify Angular here. You can configure these. Excuse me, let me pop over to this home module. So you can pull in like an Ionic specific module and stuff like that.
Nice.
And then since Angular and Ionic use more of a two-way binding with templates, you can actually pull in these components like Amplify Authenticator and just pass in framework equals Ionic.
Nice.
And you'll use the under-the-cover Ionic styling and stuff. Now, you can do additional styling on top of that. I don't have that specifically in this app right now, but for instance, this is actually an Angular app with Ionic that's set up here using responsive design. I'm already logged in, but you could do full MFA on this with just a single line of code. I can also access the storage module, in which case you can see I've got some pieces of this application framework, just a little photo picker here that I could style if I wanted to, but built in with just single lines of code if I wanted to. I could do some stuff like choosing a screenshot, and it's automatically uploaded to an S3 bucket behind the scenes for me.
Nice,
just
very
with
nice.
Interaction with the storage module and the auth module, just a couple lines of code, and now you can bundle your packages even smaller to make them really performant over the network.
Very nice, excellent. So that's just hotness with Amplify. Tell me about what's going on with AppSync.
Okay, so we got a few new things that we're going to be releasing today with AppSync. So on the service side, on the back end, some of the things that we really wanted to address is like GraphQL is great. It's really a powerful API language for interacting with application data, as we talked about, real-time, offline communication. But like any technology, there is still a little bit of a learning curve. And working with a lot of customers, some people just want to get fully running apps working instantly that they can work backwards from and basically decompile at that point. As well as some people that get comfortable with GraphQL don't necessarily want to just build up by hand a schema from scratch. They just want to deal with their data models. So we've got some more sample schemas that we've added to the console, just getting started, including a fully functioning enterprise chat app that it works with Angular as well as a PWA. We've got the code on GitHub for the front end.
Okay, so I got to check that out. Okay.
Including private chat rooms and stuff like this, locked down, one-to-one conversations. We've got this no-code API builder, so that you don't even need to start with a schema.
Okay, so I don't believe him.
Type in a type, and it's even got pre-existing query filtering baked in, hooks up to DynamoDB.
Okay, so you got to show this, because
I'm going to demo this in a second.
I really don't believe you yet. Okay.
I'm going to demo, don't worry. You can do filtering on bools, on strings, contain statements, all sorts of stuff. And this is really important for people that are prototyping really quickly using GraphQL. Like, AppSync hooks up to these different data sources that I'm going to talk about a new one in a second. But you can wire up DynamoDB and Elasticsearch. But the truth is, not everybody needs all that power. You might want to just have a low-cost, either prototyping scenario or something that you don't want to eject to that capability until you need to do so for your app. So we built some of these things in to make it even easier for people just to do a lot of common operations with a low-cost, DynamoDB infrastructure that's a scalable NoSQL solution.
Very nice. Okay.
But in addition to that, we also are announcing HTTP data sources today.
Okay, so I have to admit, this is my favorite one.
All right.
Okay, because when I've been building, I've been playing with AppSync since its release, and this is the one thing I just felt like it was missing and I needed. And now you've given it to me, so talk a little bit for everyone else what this is.
Yeah, so all this stuff I'm talking about is nice, prototyping some new greenfield apps and so forth. But the truth is, you have all of these different infrastructures out there that have existing REST backends, or maybe it's a SOAP microservice or something else, and people just want to put a GraphQL API in front of that. So with HTTP data sources, you can just wire this up to that existing backend. We support all things in our templates like query strings, headers, basic auth you can hook up. We even give you a bunch of utilities for transforming XML to JSON back through the GraphQL response and stuff like this. You can also do all of that fine-grained authorization in the GraphQL resolvers that you could do before, such as BYO, OIDC tokens, and things like that.
Okay, so I see that we have, some more great stuff there. Quickly go over that, but I want to get to the demo. So quickly tell us what's the other stuff, and now we want to see something, right, guys?
Okay.
So tell us about the other stuff, but show us some stuff.
Okay. I'll pop into the demo, and we'll come back to the other stuff in a second, too.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing is, if I'm creating a new API, I talked about these sample schemas. You can see, we've got a task app and a chat app here. So I could select any of these and then, put in my region and other things that I want to deploy it in. But I'm going to build something from scratch. So I'll call this, NYC demo. And I hit create. and I've got a provisioned endpoint and everything else behind the scenes, similar to before. But now when I come to schema, I don't actually need to create a schema from scratch. I can just click on this little create resources button, and now I could type in like, blog, I'll call it blog NYC, just so we specifically know that I'm not cheating here.
Okay.
All right. If I wanted to, I could have the title, content, rating, I could put in some other information here, like, tags, if I wanted to, and I call this string. Maybe that's optional, something like that. For now, I'm just going to stick with this basic one.
Okay.
I could manipulate things like add additional indices. I could turn off the GraphQL generation at the bottom if I wanted to for existing types. But all I have to do is press this create button. Now, behind the scenes, what's happening is you can see at the top, it's creating a DynamoDB table.
Nice.
Then it's going to populate this GraphQL schema based off of that data model that I just entered into the console and I typed on it. After it does that, it creates this logical structure called a data source, and then creates all of the different resolvers in the console.
And it does this for you at this point?
For me, right?
Wow,
My
okay.
hands aren't touching the keyboard. You can see creating resolvers. It's giving you all the stages, and we're done. Resource creation complete.
But if I am one of those people that wants to still get deep and dirty and do it myself, we haven't taken away that capability, right?
We haven't taken away that.
Okay,
In fact, just to show you another thing that we're announcing today, like I can come in here, then I can manipulate the resolvers. And in fact, to make this bit easier for you, you'll notice if I press $, we've got some autocomplete now built into the console. So if I want to pull out the user information or something else, or I didn't know what was available in the utilities class, right? I could actually go through this. In fact, I'll come up from the top, and like I could do appending errors, auto IDs, stuff like that's all available for you
Very
still.
nice, because while I love it, I'm not going to remember all of that. My brain can only hold so much.
Yep. So I haven't done anything yet. Let's actually create a couple mutations here.
Okay.
So just to cheat, I've actually got a little bit of code already here that I can do. I'll come back over to the console. I'll pop it in here, and this is going to be create blog NYC, right? And this is going to be my first AppSync demo. So I'm going to add an item in here, and then I'll maybe call this one my second, and I'll make this price 7, and maybe I'll make this rating 6.0, and I'll change this to second.
And all of this, what's cool about this is actually populating your DB table.
Yes, this is your data in your account.
In your table.
Yep.
Onyx Raven is the HTTP source new. He was assuming that you had to do it with Lambda.
You do not have to do it with Lambda.
Right.
Not at all. Not at all. And what I'm going to do?
We made it easier for you.
Yep. We made it easier. That's exactly what we did. So let me copy this information. And you'll notice we have this capability now of a filter, which I'm going to remove just for a second.
Okay.
Right, so listing all of this information, it's a little bit sluggish because of the Wi-Fi, but this information is going to come from my DynamoDB table that's in my account, as you just said, right? And it pulled back all of this information. But now let's assume that I wanted to pull anything that actually had the word first in it, right?
Okay.
So I can change the title here, and I can make this contains, and I can put the word first in there. And if I list this, it's going to do that same query, but now it's going to filter the results to just give me anything that had the word first in the title, right? And this will come back to me on screen. A little bit sluggish again because of our Wi-Fi, but it's smart enough to know any of the data types in there. So for string types, it's going to filter just on those string types.
Okay.
For Booleans, it's going to give you comparative operations. For integers, you're going to have things like greater than, less than, stuff like that.
So if I, like for instance, you have price in there. If I wanted to say I wanted the price to be greater than 5, could you also do that in there?
Yep, we'll do that one just like this. And I run this one again. You saw it actually got me the first one a second ago here. For this one, it's actually going to do the same thing. And it's going to basically do the query, execute against your DynamoDB table. And all we're doing is using the built-in DynamoDB operations. We've just made it really easy to do in GraphQL.
Nice.
Now, somebody did just ask, as you mentioned, about HTTP data sources. Nope, you don't need to go ahead and do that in Lambda. It's straight here in AppSync, so I can do HTTP.
Which is totally nice and new, by the way, Onyx Raven, it's one of my favorite ones. So instead of, to your point, having to use Lambda, if I just want an HTTP endpoint, it's baked in the console. So that's one of my favorite new features.
Yep. So I go ahead and I create this new data source, and you can put in any HTTP or HTTPS, and we support HTTP because you might have legacy data sources out there, which you can put in some of your, credential information through this. But actually, just to show you an example, if I attach this to that HTTP one, you'll see all of this stuff baked in, such as the parameters, the headers. I can do, forward some headers here. I can do XML and parse it with just this very simple transformation XML to JSON string.
Nice.
We can do filtering on the status codes,
Which
whole
is
kit and caboodle that you need.
The status codes that's always the important one, Yep.
So a couple other things that we've also released today in the last few minutes here. So another big ask from customers is like, great, you can parse and do all your own logic in your, your resolver, or use a Lambda function behind the scenes. But there's all these common things which people, really look for validation, which are coined in the industry like custom scalars, or what we're coining enhanced scalar types. And we basically, worked with a bunch of customers and took all the popular ones in the industry. JSON types, email, date, time, timestamp. There's a slew of them. We have a bunch of ISO standards in there and some more. And I'm going to actually show you this in a second. And we've namespaced this by AWS. Because GraphQL as a spec really doesn't have this kind of concept just yet. But we also wanted to make it clear to people that these are what AWS uses as best practices to do validation, like on phone numbers, for example. And these are common things that the patterns we've pulled from other strong services that implement these type of patterns and so forth. And we bake them in here in automatic validation. So no longer do customers need to actually put that code in a resolver and validate it there.
So, we had a question out there in Twitch land. It was like, how big is the data set? These queries look very slow. Well, we're here at the New York Summit where everyone's pounding on the Wi-Fi. So it's really more of a Wi-Fi thing than the query being slow. It's just, we're hammering away over here. But just to answer your question, how big is your data set? Your data set can grow to to infinite, right?
Yeah, it can be. It's your data in your account. DynamoDB tables. It's the same limit to apply there. It could be hundreds of thousands. You can still customize your tables as you like if you want to add new indexes. I could have demoed that in the type builder as well. I can actually build an index and automatically add that to GraphQL to do efficient querying, and even then apply conditional expressions like, do the IDs match the specific, string format and things like that. I can still do all sorts of those best practices and stuff like that goes on behind the scenes. Yep. And the execution is still happening there on the database level.
Gotcha.
So as a demo for some of these new types, right, like you can actually see I've got this schema that I created here where I created this just arbitrary object and I added all of the new types in. So you can see I have like AWS email, AWS JSON, date, date time, timestamp, phone number. And then, I can do simple put objects as well as list objects and get objects on these things. The resolvers, there's really nothing to them. It's just passing all the information straight back through using an auto ID to all of the values through DynamoDB. So you don't have to do any custom coding there either. So if I want to add some of this information, and I come over here, I'll again cheat, and I've copied some information. You can see that I'll actually create an object here, and I'm going to run this, and it added it through to the database.
Right.
But this worked because I had all the proper strings, like my JSON escaped and stuff like that. But let's say that I tried to use, just a raw string here for the put object, and I try to run this, right? I'm going to get an invalidation because it's actually doing type checking, strong type validation in the data plane.
That is fantastic. Okay.
And I got one more thing, Tara.
Okay.
One more thing.
There's more.
One more thing. We didn't just do all of this work for back-end engineers today. We actually are introducing an opinionated cache abstraction for front-end developers building JavaScript apps using the Apollo client inside AWS AppSync. So before, you would have to do all of this query management for offline cache, optimistic UI, version, conditional checks, everything else. And that was a lot of code. In fact, for really, one-to-many relationships, like a blog post with comments, you had to do code like this on the left. Now you can do this code in a single line, like you can see on the right-hand side where I've got this GraphQL mutation helper. So if I want to do offline coding,
that that and reduced it to that little of a footprint code and still the right pattern.
We do all of the work underneath the covers for the front-end engineers. We query, we do all of the proxying to the cache. We do the create objects, the update objects, the delete objects. We do version checking. We do optimistic UI with offline as well as online events. We even handle all the cache merging with the subscriptions as well.
That's fun.
And to get started on this today, if you go to the AppSync SDK repo, you'll notice there's in fact a tutorial here in the repo with an end-to-end way of building this real-time to-do app that you can do some of this, first-line code. So it's even so fancy. You can have multiple screens, and with a single line of code, have like all to-dos, pending to-dos, and new to-dos, and it will simultaneously delete from one and add to the other one and handle it automatically in one line of code.
I love it. Okay, so I know you guys are really hyped to get started. Our time is up, but don't worry about it. If you want to dig more into AppSync and Amplify and some of this cool GraphQL goodness, Richard has a talk today at 5, right?
5 p.m.
That he's going to go through not only the new features, but really dig into how you use this. So please come join him if it's there. If not, we will see you in Twitch land. Please ping us. But that's our time. Thank you guys for checking us out. We look forward to more sessions later.